Welcome, everybody, to episode 289 of WordPress Weekly for Wednesday, September 27th, 2017. I'm your host, Jeff Chandler, joined by the myth, the man, the legend, Jay Tripp.
Hello. Is that like a myth, a man and a legend, for like a thing for every J? Is that what that was?
This is why you're my co-host. Because you understand why I say the things I say. See, perfect. That's what I was thinking. Man, you're wonderful. John, what's up, man?
Not much, man. It's a busy couple of weeks, and I am excited to hear about how your foot is feeling since last week, where we talked about all of our broken bones and our coping mechanisms, prescribed and otherwise. So how you doing?
The ankle's doing pretty well. The medicine's helping. I'm able to stand on it now, like do some things I wasn't able to do before, and I keep working my ankle around because it's going to help when it comes to time to do therapy. So I'm trying to get my range of motion back in my ankle. So it's going to be about 3 weeks, and I'm going to do physical therapy, and hopefully I'm A-okay by the time December comes, because I'm going to be making the drive down to WordCamp US down in Nashville, Tennessee, and I got to have my right foot able to push down on the gas pedal and the brakes, or else we're going to be in trouble here. But Doc said I should be okie dokie by the time that comes around. So
good, great. When I broke my ankle in January, my wife and I got married in March, so I was real quick to go through physical therapy and all the stretching exercises and all the bands and writing the alphabet with your ankle and all the things that you're supposed to do. So I know what it is that you're about to go through. It's you're on a tight timeline, but I have a feeling you'll be okay.
I'll be okay. Everything will be all right. All right, so we have a great show lined up for you guys today. For our listeners out there, we have a pretty cool guest on. His name is Scott Bollinger, and he is a product developer focused on the WordPress space. He has created several products, including AppPress, which you may have heard from, which has grossed over $1 million. And he's also created a product called Hollerbox, which we've actually, I think it was one of your picks of the week, John.
It totally was. Hollerbox is awesome.
Yeah, so it's a free WordPress pop-up plugin. He's also done premium themes, a niche, software as a service, and a couple of other plugins. He loves developing with WordPress. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we have him on the show. And JavaScript, and learning how to grow his product businesses. Scott is presented at Macworld, New Media Expo, LoopConf, and several WordCamps. Scott, thank you very much for being on the show today, man.
You're welcome. Thank you for the extended introduction that all the readers or the listeners are bored now by.
Well, thank you for actually putting it on your blog. I mean, it makes my job easier.
I want to hear more about Macworld. I don't think I've ever asked you about that.
Oh, that was back in the day when we first launched. We went to, or no, not when we first launched, maybe like a year after we went to Macworld. It was like New Media Expo combined with Macworld. Yeah. So we had like a booth, and I did a presentation and stuff. Cool. It was cool. It was really cool. So the crowd was so different than other conferences and stuff we go to. It was like the tech gadget crowd. So we're like, hey, do you like WordPress? They're like, what's WordPress? All right, see you later.
I'm pretty sure this is your first time on the show, so let's hear about your WordPress origin story. How'd you get involved in this wonderful software we call WordPress?
Yeah, so out of college, I sold boats, and we needed a website. And so I just started tinkering around and built a really crappy site in Dreamweaver. And that was basically all.
Been there, done that.
It was a Photoshop image that was just sliced. And so it was just like a big fat image that was just had sliced and rollovers and stuff. And so the boat business went under in 2008 when the economy crashed, and I kept learning web development and started doing WordPress sites, started doing just learning and doing some for clients, and then went off, got a job as a graphic designer, which turned into web design. And then I left there and started doing client work for web clients, just building WordPress sites and stuff. Then I started up a premium theme company, and we did a lot of stuff like in the fitness industry. We did like actually a hosted platform for fitness professionals that was built on WordPress multi-site like way back in the day. And that kind of petered out and started AppPress, 3-4 years ago, and been doing that ever since.
And in fact, remember, I think around the launch of AppPress, it was about Wasn't it around the time where it was this trend where everybody was trying to turn their websites into an app, and AppPress kind of helped speed that along?
I don't know if that was a trend at the time, but I do know, mobile apps were real big and WordPress was real big. And so I just kind of thought, hey, let's kind of combine the two. And it ended up being a pretty popular thing. So we've gone through several iterations of the product, and now it's actually a host builder, a software service, and it's leaps and bounds better than when we started, but as any product is.
So one of the main reasons we brought you on is that you recently wrote a post called, or titled, Perspective on WordPress, and it relates to, you attended a e-commerce conference called Content and Commerce Summit, and you discussed how different it was from a typical WordCamp, and it gave you a lot of perspective, especially talking to a friend of yours who used Shopify. So tell us a little bit about what you were doing at that conference, and a little insight into this kind of new perspective, sort of outside the WordPress bubble that you gained.
Yeah, so my friend Cody, he owns an agency called ModeEffect. He basically got a free ticket and was like, hey, you want to come? And I'm like, oh, all right. I never go to conferences like that, but I guess I'll just go because it's in LA. It's really close to me, and it was a free ticket. So ended up going, and it's like one of these marketing conferences where everybody there is, marketer. They work for a company or they do their own thing, and a lot of non-technical people. So it was interesting to see that, because I'm used to going to WordPress events and conferences where we're mostly technical people, and there's definitely beginners there, but the people I talk to, at least my friends and stuff, are all technical people, and we're sort of have this perspective of open source, and the way we do things in WordPress is a certain way. We sell themes and plugins, and we do services, and it's sort of like everybody's awesome and nice and talented, but it just, because we're all into the same things and we all talk to each other so much, it becomes a little bit of an echo chamber. And so getting outside of that was interesting for me. It's my own fault that I was in kind of this echo chamber, but I do think that other people are in it as well. And so it was really interesting for me to get that outside perspective and go to a conference where, it's everybody was talking about Shopify and Amazon, and not a single person mentioned WordPress or WooCommerce. And this is when WordPress is by far the largest publishing platform on the web, and WooCommerce is by far the largest e-commerce provider. Shopify is, I think they have, I don't know what it is, like 9% or 13% market share or something.
I think it's about 10% last time
10%.
I checked with, I think it's built with, I was looking at. But the big thing with Shopify compared to WooCommerce may have the market share numbers, but Shopify is actually used on the its main market share is on the top 10,000 websites on the web. So it's used on very high traffic websites.
It actually, so in the enterprise, Shopify is 9% and WooCommerce is 16%. So WooCommerce, because I just wrote an article on this. This is on my blog on hollerwp.com. But that's much closer than if you look at the top 1,000,000 sites. Where the top 1,000,000 sites, WooCommerce is actually 41% of all e-commerce stores. So so Shopify is much more popular in the enterprise than it is in the top 1,000,000 sites, but they're doing really good with the bigger stores. Basically, there are people who are selling a lot on them. There are a lot of non-technical people, so who love it, like my friend is, who's using it for his store. I think the main thing that I got out of this was that WordPress is not easy to use for non-technical people, and I think sometimes we sort of talk like it is, and it really isn't. Even like my wife and I, we started a blog on WordPress.com a couple years ago, and she even had trouble on WordPress.com, just kind of writing posts and doing simple things. And I think for us to expect that non-technical people can use even a self-hosted WordPress site it's really, really difficult for them to not only to set up hosting and payment gateways and plugins and everything like that, but even just navigating the settings and installing plugins and themes and things on a WordPress site. Whereas with a platform like Shopify or Squarespace, this is all sort of an integrated experience. And I know it's comparing apples to oranges, which I mentioned in the post, because one is hosted and WordPress is not. But the thing that's important to remember is that doesn't really matter to the end consumer. They don't care if WordPress has been around longer, if it has more challenges to overcome, and if you own your own data and it's self-hosted. Like, they don't care about that stuff. They just want it to be easy to use. And platforms like Squarespace and Wix and Shopify, they have this, they started later and they have all these advantages because of that, but that doesn't matter. Like, if WordPress is going to continue to be for the non-technical user, as I've been hearing from Matt Mullenweg in our exchanges, we have a long way to go.
And something that I think is interesting, now we've had articles, I've been around the WordPress scene long enough where I've seen articles over the years that say, hey, quit saying WordPress is easy, because it's not, and here's so-and-so and here's why. But I remember way back in the early days, and this probably is back in the TypePad Exodus days and WordPress 2.3, somewhere within 2.3 and 3.5, or somewhere within those versions, there were a lot of people who were using WordPress or switched to WordPress because ease of use. It was easy to use. That was actually one of the reasons I heard from so many people back in the day. Between then and now, and I'll pose this question to both you and John, did WordPress lose its way? When did WordPress evolve into where one of the reasons to use it is that it's easy to use to now it's not easy to use? What happened?
Want to take that one, John?
I mean, I have a feeling we probably have similar outlooks, opinions on this. I think the thing that made WordPress easy to use, I think we called it easy to use, but it was actually just easy to install, and then and easy to understand. But I don't know that it was ever super easy to use. And then I think the rest of the web, or other private platforms like Squarespace, and Squarespace primarily, but Shopify also, they changed what easy meant in a totally different way. Like, Medium came and made it easy to publish online, but completely removed the customization element, because it really, if what you care about is publishing, you don't necessarily care 1,000% about customizing everything. And if you do care about customizing everything, then you're going to go have GitHub pages somewhere, because you literally do want to customize everything. And so WordPress is sort of trying to white label itself and be everything to everyone. And so you sacrifice some ease of day-to-day use by offloading a lot of stuff onto plugins and themes that just don't have the same level of polish or the same attention to detail that WordPress core itself is able to have. And then my segue to what I think your answer is going to be is that WordPress was a lot simpler 5 or 6 years ago than it is now. I mean, back then, pages and posts were the same, and categories and tags were the same, and users every place you went within WordPress was kind of homogenized across the board to look relatively the same and unified and familiar. And we have systematically since then taken every single part of WordPress and WP admin and made each thing its own new thing. Menus is a thing. Editing a user looks different than editing a post. Editing the customizer is a brand new, completely 100% unfamiliar thing. And not to mention what some things are editable on the front end, some things aren't. Some things live update, some things don't. Post formats is a completely different spin on taxonomies. Everything now is a brand new UI, which is something new for a user to learn and understand and touch. And to be honest, I think that is how WordPress lost it being easy to use, is because there are just too many unique tools, and you don't know what each of them do when they're all hanging up on the corkboard on the side of the garage. And it's easy for us because we built them or designed them or we live in it all day. But for your average user who didn't or design the tool, they just want to use the tool. It's like the famous PHP double-sided hammer, right? Like the hammer that's just hooks on both ends is like, it's useful, but it's not the right tool. It's a silly looking hammer. So that's my.
So I'm going to disagree with you a little bit, because I do think you're right about what you're saying, but I don't think that it's the main reason why this has happened. Because WordPress has always been a disjointed experience to make things happen. You have to go to it. If you look at a web page, you want to be able to like click things and be like, I want to edit this part, I want to edit that part, I want to edit that part. And it should be like, I'm looking at a web page, I want to edit the things on it in one place. But I remember when I first started using WordPress, everything you had to go to a separate place. Like even though the menu and the content are right next to each other, or the content in the sidebar, you have to go to completely different places to edit those, and they're called completely different things. Right. And that's really difficult to understand. So I think it's always been disjointed a little bit, but let me say a couple other things. I think that WordPress itself hasn't changed as much as like the use cases for it. Like people, when it first started out, it was like you could either code a website with, in static HTML and Dreamweaver or something, or you could use one of these other platforms like Typepad, or you could use WordPress, which was better. It was better and it was easier, and people were like writing blogs with it. People weren't doing like crazy WooCommerce or Ecommerce sites with 10,000 products in them. They weren't doing these like crazy business enterprise websites with all like WP API and all that kind of stuff. So it was a simpler use case at the time. And then also it was like you either code or use WordPress, and then you kind of use WordPress for your blog. But now it's like we have all these crazy plugins and doing crazy things, and they didn't always do that. And a lot of the problem is also, it's not just core, it's like plugin and theme authors, I mean, myself included, have not been focusing on non-technical users. We've been focusing on making WordPress do really cool things. And you have to add a bunch of settings and make things a little bit more complex to make it do cool things. Mm-hmm. And so that has also contributed.
So WordPress was, like, the reason that separation really even was important has gone away now. And you know this from being from AppPress and apps and being super familiar with all of the front-end app frameworks that are out there, where the nice thing about WordPress 10 years ago was that it would take care of all of the semanticness of the web for you. You could just concentrate on publishing, and then widgets and paragraph tags and all of the HTML would just magically sort of happen for you in a way that you weren't forced to subject yourself to unless you needed to dip into the HTML editor. But that was back when visual editors like Dreamweaver or Front Page or everything else were kind of notorious for spitting out like terrible, unsemantic, invalid, not valid XHTML. But now web apps just they invent elements and markup on the fly, and everything is everything and nothing is nothing, and divs are input boxes that are content editable, icons that are eyes that are italics, nothing matters. And so because the web is kind of a different place where that separation really isn't important to like the core of the user experience anymore, that the like brilliant visual editors on the web they don't care about the separation between what it is that you want to publish and what the markup is literally going to be or get validated as, or what the doc type is. Like Apple did an amazing job porting Pages and Keynote and all of these applications to the web via iCloud. They're amazing HTML5 powered web applications that port all of your presentations back down into a Pages format through iCloud, but you still can't go into the Pages application and export it as HTML. It's like we're still at this point with all of these applications where the web is able to be whatever soupy batch of ingredients that a web app needs to be. And I think that is where WordPress lost the momentum or the ease of use that it had, because we sort of took a lot of pride and BBPress was also one of the first ones to be like tableless forums. Like it wasn't tabular markup. It should have been semantically this other way. And the things that were tables, and things that weren't tables weren't tables. and that mattered back then, but it doesn't matter now. You have a bunch of divs, you style them with table styling to make them look like a table when they're not a table. Like the web is weird now, and so that separation, we don't want that separation anymore. When I think we used to really, really feel like we had to have that separation. So I think you're 100% right that what easy means is visual, when before what we had was visual, it was actually hard. Like, so an AppPress is pretty visual. Like when you're building something through AppPress, it's very step-by-step through like preview panes, and it looks like an app. And so is part of your experience with and your feeling of things going that direction with, like the customizer is sort of a half step, right? Like you kind of get to pull all the knobs on one side and then watch it happen on the other side, where AppPresser really tries to take a little bit one step deeper of an integrated type of approach towards things. So is that your guys's way?
Yeah, we actually use the customizer to build the apps now. So, and we just use JavaScript and stuff to update previews, but you have sort of an app preview that is your actual app, and you're in the theme customizer, but you're customizing your app instead of customizing a theme. So yeah, I really like the customizer. I like Gutenberg. I think that these are all really good improvements, but they're siloed improvements. They're the experience for the non-technical user is still very disjointed. Like once they get into a post and start using Gutenberg, it could be really cool, but they still have to like figure out a domain and hosting and SSL certificates and payment gateways and a million different plugins, and each plugin has its own settings page. And like, okay, now what theme do I use? I have to choose from a million different themes, then I have to customize it. Then like, okay, how do I change my menus? Well, now I have to go over to the menus. How do I do the sidebar? Well, now I have to go over to the widgets, that whole thing. So I definitely think part of the answer is like putting it all on the front end, which is what the customizer does, which is great. But being able to full end-to-end solutions such as Squarespace and Shopify, I think should be the goal. And I think it's going to be really, really difficult to sort of bring all these different areas of customization in WordPress together, because it's going to require participation from theme and plugin developers and the core team, and things like settings and just maybe having some type of setup wizard or something, which I know there have been attempts at, but it needs to be end-to-end, because this is what platforms like Shopify are doing. So it's a difficult problem.
Did you ever use About.me?
No.
So About.me had a pretty crazy page builder. It was mostly just like personal splash pages, but they had a really crazy like page builder, visual, drag and drop, all the elements, headers, footers, paragraphs, all the elements, your image, aligning everything. It was like everything was pure 100% WYSIWYG like website. And that was pretty awesome, but they eventually moved away from it. And I was never, I mean, coming from the WordPress end of it, where like that's a goal that I feel like we've sort of been striving for a few years now, when About.me moved away from the WYSIWYG and to just being kind of white label generic profile pages, I was kind of shocked actually, because it was like, wow, like here's a thing that we've wanted for a really long time that they decided to just pivot off of and completely move away from.
No, one of the things you brought up in your post, which I thought was very interesting, is that, let me just ask you point blank, would you recommend WordPress to a family member or a friend who is looking to get up and started today with a website, to blog, or maybe let's extend it a little bit, maybe they wanted to sell just a few products, maybe they have one or two things they want to sell. Would you recommend WordPress to them? Definitely not. No. See, there you go. That to me is very interesting and telling. I know Alex Vasquez, he commented pretty much with the same mindset on your article. And I was sort of thinking to myself the other day, I said, okay, if somebody came up to me, I've worked with WordPress, I've worked in WordPress, I haven't really built sites for 8 years, but I'm very familiar with WordPress. And I was wondering, well, if somebody asked me, hey, I need a website, I need to get a website up and going, should I use WordPress? And if I'm honest with myself, I would probably say no, or at least suggest that they go to WordPress.com, because the hosts today have made it very easy with their one-click installers. And even if you take a look at GoDaddy and Bluehost, they've now come up with onboarding experiences with WordPress to where you can install a theme or a plugin and kind of get you to a point where you can start writing stuff, at the end of the process. But after that, with the domain, the SSL cert, teaching people, about the editor and about post formats and when you should use them and when you shouldn't. And well, your theme has to support them, and if not, then this is how your post will look. And then the customizer. Like I said on Twitter, I've become an unhappiness engineer when it comes to helping people who use WordPress.
So I need to spin you guys back around. This is what I need to do, because this is a phase that I think a lot of us are going to go through once you get really familiar and really close to something. Like if you are a magician, it makes it really hard to enjoy other people's magic because you're looking for different stuff than other people are looking for. You're trying to solve different problems. You're not able to enjoy it as just an audience member looking at and being entertained by a thing. And that was part of the reason why I actually got out of video game design. Was I enjoy video games, some of them, not all of them, and as I get older, fewer, but it started to really ruin the magic of how something that I really enjoyed a lot that I just didn't want to be that close to. And so part of me wonders, right, if we've been staring at WordPress for 10 years now, at least close to 30% of our lives so far, that maybe for us, some of this magic is a little bit gone because we see all the sharp edges and we know that there's not a ton that we're able to necessarily do about it. Whereas if you want to buy a video game and enjoy a video game, you just go out, you buy the game, you've got a Nintendo Switch now, Zelda's awesome, you sit and play it, and you've done no work. Whereas for someone to spin up a website, they still have to do you can see the work that they have to do, and you know what the hurdles are in front of them. So we're sort of jaded by it. And so I think hosting companies are trying really hard to solve these problems, but I think maybe they are in a similar rut where they're solving the same problems in the same way. Whereas like we should be giving WordPress sites as like gifts, like as here is something that is already done for you. Here is an assembled website. You are a photographer. Here is your photography WordPress site with the themes set up and a place to put all your photos, and all of that is solved and done. You're a plumber. Here's your plumber website. You're whatever you are, this is already solved and done for you. But because we know that it's going to take 100 little intricate steps to solve to beat the game, our outlooks, I think, are maybe skewed.
Well, I agree a little bit on that, but for me, I don't think that's my issue. I think the problem is that, like, my neighbor is a plumber, and he hates computers. He doesn't touch a computer. And so if he were going to say to me, how should I go set up a website? I'd be like, either pay someone to do it, and like WordPress is an awesome solution if you can afford that, or go get a site like on Squarespace. And once that website starts to grow and you start to tinker with Squarespace and you get to a point where you're like, I need more than what Squarespace has to offer, or Wix or whatever, then you get into WordPress, because then you're like invested a little bit. You kind of are like, I need more. I need to put in more work, or I need to pay somebody. It's almost like WordPress needs to either be, you need to pay somebody to do it, or it needs to be like your second website.
Yeah. And so those are implementation details. What if a good web host came around? What if a Liquid Web or a Pagely or a Pantheon built actual solutions that said, here's your plumber website. Here's a very plumber specific theme that looks plumbery, and here's a lawyer specific theme that looks lawyery. And here's
.com is doing that.
.com is starting.
You have to do it vertically. That's, I think, the challenge for hosts, because their hosting is such a horizontal game. Like, they just need so many numbers, and they can't restrict people to doing certain things unless they go out to verticals. So .com is definitely trying that.
GoDaddy is trying that with their recent onboarding experience, where you go through the onboarding process saying, they kind of give you, I don't know if they give you a list, but they kind of want to know what vertical you're in. Like, are you a plumber? Or are you in a certain trade? Are you doing something else? And they have in the back end, they have, a theme or two related to that vertical that they set you up with.
But the other problem with our sort of ecosystem inside like the greater WordPress economy is individual contractors might be able to see a lot of potential with like, hey, I built one really awesome website for a group of lawyers, and so this is clearly a need that I've identified, and I can duplicate this thing that for other law firms should they find me or approach me or what have you. But from that point, I think none of us, or a limited few, understand or are outgoing or have the salesmanship or the wherewithal to drudge through the cold calls and call every lawyer and build up a process and a service and get everyone hosted and turn it into a thing. And that's just a lot of upfront work that has no guaranteed return, when there are things that have better guaranteed returns, like add-on stores or products or other SaaS offerings for things that are simpler to build and maintain or whatever else. So it'll happen. I have a feeling it'll happen. It's just we haven't. No one has invested the time or labor to really double down on solving those problems in that way.
Well, that's not actually true. There's been a ton of vertical solutions. There's been, like, I did one for fitness people called FitPro that was WordPress multi-site with a bunch of pre-installed plugins and a theme, and it was, it was pre-set up for you. I did, or there's been like
Tanner Mushi. Tanner did one for what was it called? Something church, for like church websites.
Church sites or something.
It was like church themes. I've seen one for churches. I've seen a few for churches, actually.
FaithMade did one. There's been like Restaurant Engine. Brian Castle did that one. He did one for hotels, I think, too. And then like Happy Tables, obviously.
Rainmaker
pivoted. So, but I think a lot of people have done the vertical. There's like Pro Photo Blogs, I think, does WordPress sites for photo people. I just think that they're a bit smaller, so maybe we don't hear about them as much. But you're right, it's difficult because it's all just sales. Like, you set up this thing and then it's all just outside direct sales or whatever, content marketing to get the people there to sign up. But actually, I think it's a great idea for a business. It just, it takes time.
The thing is, we all are really rooting for everyone to be successful, but then at the same time, we're all like sort of haters, where no one wants to jump on the bandwagon too soon in case something goes down in flames. So we all say like, "Oh, that's a great idea. What can I do to help?" But we still watch these things kind of sit stagnant and not get a ton of help or support.
I'm gonna reel this back in a bit. Your post actually got the attention of the one Matt Mullenweg, who left a couple of comments on your blog post, and he thanked you for bringing in the outside perspective. He says that's it's very valuable to bring that kind of stuff in. But he says, and Matt knows this, that it all comes down to the user experience. And he was saying things like people look at him weird, like he's smoking something, when he talks about the importance of Shopify, Wix, and Squarespace shaping the independent web in the next 4 to 5 years. And he talks about the evolution of WordPress, and he says that WooCommerce is where WordPress was in 2008, and he kind of makes some comparisons. Think of Shopify like TypePad, if you think back to the day of what TypePad was compared to what WordPress was back in the day. And and he mentions the fact that a lot of hosts today are really good at the installing process, but when it comes to selling something where you got to go through a setup, configuration, and error-prone sign-up process, payment providers, and all the other things that encompass e-commerce, that WooCommerce has a long way to go. But he says that he's proud of his team. He's hopeful for where they're going to take WooCommerce, and this kind of transition into a conversation of, is WordPress built with the broader non-technical audience in mind? And tell us a little bit about how that conversation went.
Well, yeah, I exchanged some comments with him and actually exchanged some tweets with him as well. And the impression that I got was that WordPress has always been for non-technical people, and that is still the goal. And so that is, maybe it's my own fault, but that was kind of news to me. So, like, not that we haven't been going after non-technical people, like I get it with WordCamps and stuff, but I don't know if that's the general sort of like zeitgeist, at least amongst like plugin theme developers and people who are building on top of WordPress, if that's like really what they're trying to do. I think that people are trying to make WordPress do cool things, but they're not necessarily making their settings pages and their whole like end-to-end user experience for non-technical people. It's kind of like we build, the people who send us in support tickets and stuff are usually like agencies and developers, at least for my product. I know that's different for different products, but and those are kind of the people that I build things for. So if we're going to continue to be for the non-technical user, the environment is different now. Like Shopify and Squarespace and stuff, they've been around for a while, but I feel like the web is just different now. There's way more competitors. There's way easier things for people to go do, like fire up a self-hosted site. And so if we're really going to continue to be for that user, there's a lot of heavy competition in that space. And I think Matt's right. Like WordPress defeated the giant like TypePad back in the day, which is cool. But I don't know. I see like I say this to him, like the general feeling I get amongst people that I talk to, and the feeling that I have is that I'm not recommending WordPress for non-technical people, and I don't think anybody else is either. So that needs to be fixed if that's our goal.
And what about this assertion that the platform has become for developers and agencies over the past few years?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I think WordPress is best for. It's for agencies to build sites for clients because they can build huge monster sites that do crazy awesome things for enterprises like, Wired and TechCrunch and Disney and whatever else. Or you can just kind of build up a small business site pretty easily. So I think that that's who it's best for right now. And that's kind of where I see it's like niche sort of. And so if we want to change that and make it more for like the person who doesn't know anything about computers and just wants a website, I don't think that's where it is right now.
I find it somewhat concerning and interesting in that WordPress had so much word of mouth advertising back in the day that it's really helped propel the platform forward. And now we're getting to a point where even the established people, and this kind of harpens back to maybe we're jaded, but now some of the people that have been in this the longest with WordPress are getting to the point where they're not recommending it anymore to people who haven't even heard of or tried out the platform yet. That sounds like a tough spot for WordPress to be in. How does WordPress change that?
So the thing that I've said before about this problem, I don't know on this podcast or not, but is one of the things that WordPress had going for it in the early days is that, which people think it didn't have going for it, but I think is the thing that helped propel it, is that the fact that WordPress had a reputation for just being blogging software at least meant that people knew what to expect from it, which I think also is what really helped BuddyPress in the early days be super popular and have a lot of instant momentum right away. Was when you installed BuddyPress, it turned WordPress into a very specific type of thing. And the decisions were made, and it was a very opinionated piece of software. You had to use a BuddyPress specific theme. No other theme would work. You had to use multi-site. Single site would not work. And it made all of the decisions for you, and it basically did the implementation. If you want a open source social network, BuddyPress will literally do all of those things for you. Once we started trying to make it more flexible, we ended up kind of reducing the opinionation of this piece of software. And by making it more of a tool, we also now lost a lot of the passion that people had for the original problem that it solved in the first place. And so one of the things that WooCommerce has done historically very well is make your WordPress an online store. It doesn't mean that it couldn't do it better, but I think we've concentrated on making WordPress sort of be this one-size-fit-all tool for a really long time. so that it could sort of be a competitor answer to Drupal, so that it could sort of be an application framework and be all these things that we can see sort of relatively clearly that it could be.
Well, there's no shortage of comments on the tavern that say WordPress has an identity crisis, and it has had one for years now.
I would agree with that. Having BuddyPress having had its own also very similar identity crisis. So if it was a very opinionated piece of software like Shopify, very clearly is what it is. Do you get to customize it and make it pretty and cool and match your brand and everything? Yes, but it is the tool that does that one thing. People know what to expect from it, and they know other people know what to get out of it when they get there.
Well, and they can do it really well because they're doing one thing, and they can do one thing really well.
And so it's a problem, but every problem is an opportunity. Where if someone really was going to concentrate on the implementation details of onboarding WooCommerce to make it an amazing onboarding experience, to get a theme picked and set up and stuff set up and Stripe integrated and payments working, and if you could get a 5-minute install of WooCommerce and get a website up and running, would really shift the tides, or start to, I think. Because there'd be way more opinions made that were reliable and correct, and there would be many more decisions offloaded that the user wouldn't be forced to make at all. And so it has to be good, has to be right. But if it was good and right, is an opportunity for bigger businesses or web hosts or individuals to, and I think we call those wizards, but they're not really. I see that as like a wizard is like a step through, and I don't know. I guess I imagine something a lot more than no wizard. We've made these decisions for you. This is the experience you're getting, and we know that it's the best experience you could have. Yeah. I think would it go a really, really long way. Boone Gerges has some of this with Commons in a Box that sort of bolts on top of BuddyPress for making BuddyPress work really well for an educational setting. And so in that niche, there is a lot of success with Commons in a Box and BuddyPress because it solves very specific problems for a very specific group of people. But if WordPress was able to concentrate on bloggers for blogging, on stores for selling, on these things for this way, I think would actually go a lot farther than the accidental direction we've gone of making BuddyPress super flexible for all these things, and BBPress super flexible, and WooCommerce can work with all these themes and stuff. It was really good ideas, but I honestly don't know if in the long run that is actually was the best, like the best direction to go. We say decisions and not options, but I think maybe we mean opinions and not options. Like someone needs to kind of say, this is the best way to solve this problem. And instead of saying, like, we've made a bunch of decisions for you that you don't have to. Like, I think what WordPress needs is more opinionated, is to be more opinionated by itself, and plugins need to be more opinionated.
So I know Matt Mulloway said that he'd love to see you update your blog posts in 2019 or 2020 with the state of the various off-the-shelf e-commerce solutions. But I think this was, first of all, Scott, was an excellent post. It's great to have these kind of perspectives published in the WordPress space, and your friend's doing pretty well. That I was checking out a Shopify site where he's going to gross $1 million in revenue. It's a sporting and clothing store. And one thing I noticed about that site that was kind of neat was in the bottom left-hand corner, you see notices of people in their location or their state, their city and state, and what they purchased. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting, because I always found myself wanting to click, and see what they purchased. I said, they're messing with my head. It must be one of those e-commerce things.
All about that, actually.
Yeah, well, there you go. But it's kind of a nice looking site. But so what is, before we wrap it up here, we didn't even get into the products, what your thoughts are on products and their evolution in the WordPress space, which, hey, we could probably do a whole show just on that on its own. But what's your main takeaway from this, from what you publish on perspectives of WordPress?
The main takeaway, I think, getting outside information, and going to conferences that are not necessarily in your niche is great. Talking to people who are in different industries, reading books and articles about things that are not necessarily right in your little niche, I think is really important. I think it gives good perspective. And I think, like we've talked about, there's a lot of opportunity for vertical WordPress solutions, hosted solutions. And I see the big guys I'm sure the big guys have had their eye on this for a while, and many people have already done it. But there's definitely opportunity there for smaller guys, I think, as well, to make little sort of SaaS solutions for a certain niche and just kind of fulfill it all with WordPress and multi-site and a pre-built theme and all that kind of stuff.
I'll tell you a vertical that's probably filled with green, and it's a green vertical, but it's marijuana industry with dispensaries and websites and bolting on e-commerce and doing things of that nature. If you could find a vertical that caters to the marijuana industry and you're good at it, there's green everywhere for you probably.
Yeah, there's probably some legal loopholes with that right now, but yeah.
All right, so
somebody has something for this, isn't there? Like a WP dispensary?
Yeah, I think that's a plugin, or at least a shop or a business dedicated to the whole dispensary industry. So he's got different plugins and different themes he's actually working on. In fact, I just wrote about somebody not too long ago over in Boston. He's got a whole business set up to do themes and plugins for the marijuana industry. So, yeah. Well, anyways, it was great to have you on, Scott. Appreciate your time to come on and talk about your post in further detail. I think it's filled with makes for an excellent discussion in terms of the state of WordPress. Maybe I'll ask you this before we let you go. What the state of, if you look at the immediate future of WordPress, which is the customizer, Gutenberg, there have been some steps towards an onboarding new user experience for WordPress. Are you optimistic about the future of WordPress and getting to the point where disjointed becomes jointed and we start having this unified experience with WordPress? Or is there just too many loose pieces and third-party themes and plugins to where we're just never going to be able to have or mimic the experience that you get with the closed system like a Squarespace or a Wix?
I'm optimistic. I think there's a lot of smart people working on these problems. I like Gutenberg. I like the theme customizer. I think it's going to be really difficult to get there with an iterative process like we have in Core, and also just having a community where so many people are developing on top of it that would have to be involved in that. I think it's going to be really difficult. It might require somebody else to build sort of a hosted solution that forces these sort of things to happen separately from core and plugins and themes. But I'm optimistic, man. I think we have a big community. Everybody's really smart and talented, and we'll figure it out. But it definitely is something that people need to be aware of and we need to be working towards together. So it's good to kind of get out of the echo chamber and really sort of criticize ourselves and look, because it's a competitive world out there now, and maybe it wasn't like this in 2000. All
right. So, any last questions, Sean, before we let Scott go?
No, man. It's awesome to chat with you. Hollerbox is awesome, and AppPress seems like it's still doing really well. So it's been great to catch up and hang out with you. Where are you going to be next?
Holla!
Where am I going to see? Are you going to be at WordCamp US? Where are we going to see you next?
I'll be at LA, WooConf, and WordCamp US.
WooConf. I bet you there's a mention of WooCommerce at WooConf.
I bet there will be.
Wouldn't that be something?
I think you should probably keep account of how many times somebody mentions Shopify.
Oh, there you go. I'll write a follow-up post about it.
I went to WooConf and all I heard about was Shopify and Amazon. I love a post like that. Scott, thanks again for being on the show. How can people follow you or get in touch with you?
ScottBollinger.com is my blog. I write about business and life. Twitter @ScottBollinger.
And again, you have AppPress and Hollerbox. People can actually find Hollerbox on the WordPress.org plugin directory, correct?
Yes, they can.
All right, and just I'll let you let's plug-a-palooza. I'll let you give us a very brief, quick description of Hollerbox.
So it's a free pop-up plugin, and it also has a lot of unique features. Like we have the FOMO pop-ups, like you were talking about, where it'll show the actual sale notifications integrates with WooCommerce, EDD, Give, MemberPress, stuff like that. And it has, it has a lot of really cool free features. So if you go on .org, you can check it out. Just search for Hollerbox.
Excellent. Thanks again, Scott, for being on the show. We'll have you on in the future to talk about products and the revolution in the WordPress space, because I find that to be an interesting topic as well. And all the best to you, man.
All right. Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.
See you,
No
Scott.
problem.
Thanks.
So there you go, John. Quite the conversation there on the perspective of WordPress, and you need to do me a favor, John. Get out of the bubble, please, so you can bring on a fresh view, a fresh perspective onto the show. All right.
Okay. All right. I'll
So
find a
there you go.
different bubble for a while and come back.
Different bubble. So I do want to talk about a couple of topics that are very important to the WordPress space. The first is that, how about this bombshell? Facebook to relicense React after backlash from open source community. So Facebook announced its intentions to relicense React, Jest, Flow, and Immutable.js under the MIT license. And React community members began rallying around a petition to relicense React after the Apache Software Foundation, which we've talked about, added Facebook's BSD plus patents license to its Category X list of disallowed licenses for Apache PMC members. So it was Apache, a number of other GitHub issues were raised, a number of different people from projects, open source projects, rallied around to try and get Facebook to change its license, and Facebook ultimately said no. And then Matt Mullenweg published a post that said, due to the BSD patents clause, that we are going to remove away from having React both in Gutenberg and whatever framework they would choose. They were going to rewrite Calypso in that JavaScript framework. And then a few days later, Facebook's like, oh no, and they actually write a post that says they are going to relicense these projects because React is the foundation of a broad ecosystem of open source software for the web, and they don't want to hold back forward progress for non-technical reasons. And they say that the decision comes after several weeks of disappointment and uncertainty for our community. And although they still believe that the BSD plus patents license provides some benefits to users of their products, they acknowledge that they failed to decisively convince this community. So then the question is, well, what does this mean for React, or what does this mean for Gutenberg and choosing a JavaScript framework for core? Mm-hmm. And Matt Mullenweg wrote up a post and said that that they have not made a decision to go back with React just yet, that this whole kerfluffle around React and its licenses has actually created a lot of great discussions from passionate people in the community about all these various JavaScript frameworks, and no official decision has been made. In fact, there was a big JavaScript core developer meeting yesterday at about 11 a.m., but there wasn't anything in particular that was decided upon, just a lot of discussion about the benefits of JavaScript frameworks. And the cool thing about that meeting was that there were people from Chrome, React, Evan Yu was participating in that channel. So different members from different frameworks and the open source community is participating in that discussion, which was really cool. But as far as an official JavaScript framework for WordPress core is concerned, there's no decision that has been made yet. And the way that Gutenberg development has been going, now there's this talk of creating a way to create Gutenberg blocks in a agnostic sort of way. So any JavaScript framework you want to use, whether it's Vue, Preact, or who knows what else, you'll be able to create Gutenberg blocks. And I think at the end of the day, that's what the team is hoping for, is not to tie anything specifically to a framework, but to build things in such a way to where you could use any JavaScript framework you want and build Gutenberg blocks. Now, the discussion comes down to if you bundle a framework with core, then that's going to be the de facto standard and the one that probably so many people pick up on or adopt or learn. But then what if we run into an issue, John, in the future where we load up a page and we're loading Vue, React, Preact, we're loading all the different libraries that all the different developers wanted to use, and it sounds like we have jQuery all over again.
jQuery, MooTools, and on and on and on. And so these things ebb and flow. We've seen the web expand and grow and change over the course of its life, and it's not any different than any other infrastructure that there is in the world. There will always be many of us who understand and want for these things to be tuned and efficient and using all the same connecting points and pieces and components. But the world doesn't always get the luxury of working that way. Your roads don't always meet up the way they're supposed to, and they use different types of pavement and concrete and asphalt to make everything work. And 99% of us don't care as long as the roads don't hurt our cars. But if what you do is work in a public works sector where you care about the materials or the components of these things, then you do start to care immensely. But your average person doesn't. So normally I'm a little bit clairvoyant when it comes to how some of these things are going to work, but I was really surprised to see Facebook announce the relicense and pivot.
Well, let me ask you this, John. Do you think WordPress or Matt's decision had anything to do with that?
It had to have.
That's right.
It really did have to. It had to. So the interesting part is Facebook and Automatic have had some kind of relationship for a while, because some of Facebook's developer blogs and stuff were on VIP. They were hosting on WordPress.com VIP. So it's not like they are total strangers when it comes to building things or talking to one another with whoever's talking to who. It's not like there was never any other type of inward facing relationship or dialogue with someone from Facebook and someone at Automatic. So when it comes to someone who as influential as Matt is on the web and in open source in general, when you announce that you just can't do something because you don't agree with something else, it means a lot, and it makes everyone start to reconsider if maybe they're fighting the good fight for the right or the wrong reasons, and starts to really reconsider what a world without Matt's support or WordPress's support or the greater open source community support looks like. And it's pretty bleak. And so after I forget who exactly, I'd have to go back and look, but whoever wrote the original post from Facebook that said that they were holding fast, like, we've decided for sure we're going to stick with our license. It was like, oh, well, it's good to know definitively that is not a thing anymore. And then Matt confirms definitively, well, thanks, but no thanks. Thank you for the clarification. We're going to choose to go a different way. And then when it all comes back around, I didn't expect to see that. So my question, I think everyone's question, but like my personal opinion on stuff like this is kind of once bitten, twice shy. Like you already told us really confidently for a year or years that you weren't interested in being involved or doing what we kind of knew was the right thing. And so if we go with React, or if WordPress goes with React, or if the greater WordPress community or the open source community all doubles down and says, hey, React is great, this is what we're going to do, we're all in, we love React, we're all for it, go, go, go. Who's to say 5 years from now that Facebook won't pull the rug right out from underneath? I'm not saying they will. I have no indication that they would. But, man,
that seems like it'd be really dumb.
It would be really dumb, but it's possible. It is a possibility.
Companies do really dumb things all the time. So what am I talking about?
And it is always a possibility with anything. Okay, sure. So I'm not trying to worry about a thing that you could always worry about. You could always worry about getting hit by lightning. I'm not always worried about getting hit by lightning. But if we've got spiritually, I think this goes back to what I said earlier, is if Gutenberg, or if the way forward is truly to be front-end framework agnostic and non-committal, then again, it kind of sucks. It's the WordPress project not being opinionated on the direction that things should go. And now that means we've got another 5 years worth of everyone doing everything and hoping that it works out okay enough. And so is the web getting faster across the world? Yes. Are we caring a little bit less and a little bit less and a little bit less every day about how efficient and tight that a website and its JavaScript and its components are? Sure. Websites are hugely wasteful and not as necessarily performant as they used to be anymore. But is now the time to stop caring about those types of efficiencies and let everyone do what they want? Or is now a time to be very opinionated and stern and pick a direction and go with it? So it's always 50-50 with stuff like this. So I'm really at a loss. I have very little insight or prediction into what exactly is going to happen next.
I know Gary Pendergast, he actually wrote a great comment on the Tavern, which actually includes a timeline of things leading up to React being the library of choice, and then some of the things that came into play, like the patent grant and the relicensing of React to MIT. But at the end, he says, I wouldn't worry too much about this decision. The far more important part is that you'll be able to write Guten blocks, which I think is a pretty neat word in and of itself, using whatever framework you prefer. And this focus on interoperability will drive WordPress's JavaScript development for many years to come.
If we go with my trend of portmanteaus with Gutenberg, then maybe this is an opportunity for someone to build the front-end framework agnostic version, the middleware, and then call it Glutenberg.
Okay. Yep. Well, there you go. Well, I mean, we already have a plugin in the directory called gluten-free.
So that's funny. That's right.
That brings the editor back to what it was. So there you have it, folks. We'll have more info and insight on the JavaScript drama and what's happening with Gutenberg and all that other stuff in the weeks to come. I can guarantee you that. I wanted to go over a couple of quick stories here, shout outs, and I guess bon voyage to Brad Tusnard and Pippa Williamson of the Apply Filters podcast, as they announced that they were retiring from podcasting. So they did a bi-weekly show called Apply Filters, which I believe you were a big fan of.
Oh, yeah.
And they will go off the air after publishing its 83rd episode. Now, the hosts have not yet revealed why they were retiring, but they plan to share more details in the final episode, which is a mailbag episode. So that's when listeners send in their questions, they answer them on the air, and there you have it. So, kudos to those folks. And I know that a lot of their loyal listeners are disappointed to hear this news, and very thankful for the people in the comments who have suggested WordPress Weekly as a podcast to listen to. But when you think of developer-oriented WordPress podcasts, I'm not in that realm. I don't know of anything really that's available. I mean, the first thing I always thought of was Apply Filters because Pippin and Brett are on there. But John, do you know of any other WordPress developer-oriented podcasts that people could listen to?
Ours now, right? I think
but ours isn't developer-oriented, except when you make it.
A little bit of flair to that if I can. I tried doing my own for a little while, but it's not easy to stick to those guns. Honestly, I'm not familiar with any other developer-specific focused podcasts in the space that caught my eye or attention. So it's not I'm sure they're out there. They have to be out there. How I built it is sort of one, but not always deep developer dives. So, and Pippin and Brad used to get pretty deep into it and answer a lot of questions about APIs and the way that stuff works. So they'll be missed for sure. I'm sure, it's like a happy trails, right? I'm sure they'll be back, or maybe we'll talk to them on here on WordPress Weekly. But now I feel like we should do some digging and see what else we can find, and who do we recommend people listen to now instead of Apply Filters?
We will do that, and I'll actually put the feeler out there on Twitter, because I know a lot of other people are in the WordPress podcast, and there's got to be something out there. I know there is. Donate WC, an initiative that we talked about last week, has reached their fundraising goal of €1,000, And this is an initiative that's focused on providing some less fortunate people an opportunity to attend large WordCamps. It's by automatician Ines Van Essen, who is a happiness engineer over at Automatic. And she says that the responses and feedback that have come in during the past week have been overwhelming. She says that, I can't believe we can already move on to legalizing things and actually getting things done. She says the lesson learned here is do not spend 2 years thinking about something you could do or you could maybe do at some point in the future. The time is now, and it's time to change some lives, unquote, which I think is pretty neat. So now she's going to work on getting the website together, legalizing things, turning it into an official nonprofit. And even greater news, the folks behind GiveWP have given her the plugin and access to whatever add-on she needs, free of charge, because it's a nonprofit, and that now she'll be able to keep and collect more of the money from donations and pass that on to whoever she decides to sponsor for these events. So great initiative all around.
The folks at GiveWP are like the most awesome, generous, nicest people that there are.
How many weeks in a row have we said that the people at GiveWP are awesome? Yeah, it's almost like they should start paying us. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But for real, I've even said it. Those people at GiveWP are awesome folks. If you ever get the chance to meet them in person, please do.
Super nice.
Yeah, they do a lot of wonderful things for the WordPress community. WordCamp for Publishers, which was a niche WordCamp in Denver, Colorado. The videos are now available on YouTube. And I've heard from some people who attended this event, and they said it was the best WordCamp event or WordPress event they've ever been to, including all other WordCamps, if you can imagine that. So it was the first time it was held. It was held at the Denver Post building. It was well received. In fact, it went over so well, they are already planning next year's conference. So there you go. So if you go on to, I'll have a link to this in the show notes. Of course, Sarah Gooding published an article about this on the Tavern, so you can always find it on the Tavern. But there is a link to the YouTube channel, and there's a playlist with all the presentations all through there. So you can watch them one in a row. You can pick between the playlists, so it's nice and organized. So congrats to the WordCamp for Publishers organizing team. And wow, sounds like they had a very successful event.
Sounds awesome. I was just looking at AppPress, actually thinking about that too. There's like this past week has been lots of stuff going on.
AppPress took place this past weekend. I haven't read the post yet, but I heard that was a success. And if everything goes well, Brad Williams from Web Dev Studios, he had the opportunity to attend AppPress, and he's actually going to do a guest blog post for me on the Tavern about his experience at that event. So hopefully we'll be able to read more about that on the Tavern. And last but not least, last week it was it display widgets? This week it's SI CAPTCHA. CAPTCHA anti-spam plugin was permanently removed from WordPress.org due to spam code. This plugin added a CAPTCHA image test to WordPress forums to prevent spam. It was compatible with forums generated by BBPress, BuddyPress, Jetpack, and WooCommerce. It had more than 300,000 active installs at the time of removal. Now, Mike Chalice, the original author of the plugin, said that a WordPress.org user named FastSecure became the new owner of SI CAPTCHA anti-spam in June earlier this year. He was not aware of the new owner's plans for the plugin, but he ended up posting a notice on the WordPress.org support forums to inform users about why it was removed. And evidently it had connections to third-party servers. It had spam code, but because of the way it was implemented incorrectly, the spam code didn't display. So the team actually removed those versions and uploaded a clean version, 3.0.3. They've removed the plugin from the directory or the listing. So if you're a user of SI CAPTCHA anti-spam plugin, you'll want to upgrade to 3.0.3. That is the last known good clean version. And again, this incident is another reminder for users to be alert on when WordPress plugins change hands. However, that's not the easiest thing to do because you're not notified of when a plugin is removed. You're not notified when an owner changes. And there is some work being done on that. Again, I mentioned in last week's show that Mika Epstein has a ticket on track in the meta ticket to publicly display a reason for why a plugin was removed. And also WordFence has a service where they actually check your plugins that are installed to the directory once or twice a day. And if one's removed, it'll actually tell you, it'll let you know that this plugin is not currently on the directory for whatever reason. So that's nice. So again, there's this issue, and I think this is going to happen more often, where plugins, nefarious people are going to be doing some nasty things, and plugins are going to get caught, and they're either going to be removed or something to that effect. And users of those plugins, I mean, we're talking about 300,000 active sites who now either are still using vulnerable code or have no idea of what's happened with the particular plugin they're using. It's a weird situation to be in if you're an end user.
These are opportunists, right? They found an opportunity to take advantage of innocent people. It's a scary attack vector. It's a scary time for this to kind of be a problem. And so I think you're right that we will see a few more of these happen because people will be offered more money than they maybe thought of. If someone was going to say, here's $15,000 or $25,000 for this piece of software that you wrote, and you get to hand it over and never worry about it again, that is a captivating offer for many people for many pieces of software that are just WordPress plugins. So,
and in both situations with SI Capsca and then last week Display Widgets, the previous owners have had to come up front and say, and apologize and say, I didn't know this was going to happen, which leads me into my pick of the week, which is a post by Samuel Otto-Wood of last year on the topic of selling your plugins. And he published this on the MakeWordPress.org site for plugins. And he talks about, this was around the time when somebody was going around emailing plugin authors and asking them if they, if they're interested in selling your plugin. And, the bottom line comes down to, you really got to do your background research on these people that are going to be purchasing your plugins, because if you don't and they do something nefarious, it looks bad on you. It looks bad on the original author. It looks like you didn't do your due diligence. And these people are not just, they're not paying for your code because if they wanted your code, they just fork it. I mean, it's GPL, the code's available. They're paying for access to those sites, which could be in the hundreds of thousands. And it's kind of, thinking about it right now as I guess consumer might be the wrong word, but as an end user, to have free access to my site that way and just be able to sell it willy-nilly, I have no say-so in that other than to stop using the plugin or hope for the best. So, if you're a plugin author out there, please, please, please do your due diligence, do your research, do background checks if you have to, on whoever it is, an organization, a business, an individual that's going to be acquiring your plugin. Because if they decide to throw some spam ads in there and try and get as much money as they can, to make a quick buck out of 300, 400, 500,000 websites before it gets caught and then eventually banned in the WordPress directory, it's going to look bad on you, and it could affect whatever it is you're doing in your current business. It could tank your sales. So think twice before selling your plugins. And if Otto says that if they're going to pay you based on the number of active installs, then you shouldn't even consider it. Just run away as far as possible. So I have a link to this guide in the post that will be in the show notes, and there you have it.
And Otto has been in the plugin directory working and keeping eyes on things for more years than most people. So if you were ever going to take anybody's advice on how to and what this looks like, Otto would be the guy to listen to here. So good pick of the week. That's a great pick. My pick has nothing.
What the hell is this? Metroid. So I knew there was going to be a Metroid reference on the show eventually.
Eventually there would be. So I've got two picks. One is something that somebody tweeted this morning that I totally am going to mispronounce her last name. But we'll link to this in the show notes. Person by the name of Amy Ciavolino. Gosh, I hope that's right. I feel like I'm pretty close. Gave a talk somewhere and put together a PDF, some slides titled Mindful Communication in Code Reviews. And as I was reading through these slides, it was almost as if Amy had plucked all of my general rules for doing code reviews, reviewing pull requests and patches, kind of helping others level up and be as good as they can, from WordPress.com VIP code reviews all the way to just maintaining my own weird open source WordPress plugins and stuff like that. And so it was a super good read because it put into words a lot of the things that I had wanted to type up for a long time about coming from somebody else's perspective, considering where it is that they might be when they're contributing or when they're trying to write some code, and being compassionate and trying to be helpful and providing constructive criticism, and keeping away from all the nitpicks, and really trying to like working towards making that code acceptable and not trying to work against someone who's trying to help. And so that's my real pick of the week. The other pick of the week that you knew I wouldn't be able to not talk about, I was going to talk about last week because it was fresher in my mind last week than it is now, is one of my favorite video games, of the few that I actually play anymore, just had its new, a remake, but the newest game, the first game came out it's in 7 years as a new a game for the Nintendo 3DS called Samus Returns. And so it is a remake of the original Metroid 2 for the Game Boy that came out, gosh, I don't know, 25 years ago probably. But the Nintendo 3DS was like a platform I had never owned or never played any games on. And I bought the 3DS, $200 specifically for this Metroid game, because there's been a million Zeldas and a million Mario games and whatever else, but there's been no Metroid game. And so the 3DS is like an incredible piece of 4 or 5-year-old technology at this point. It really blew my mind how cool of a game that this is and the system that it is. And as far as video games go and games that haven't seen anything in 7 years, the development team, Mercury Steam, I forget, I think they're out of Portugal. I'd have to double check, but they re-energized a franchise. They brought something back that had literally had 7 years of no attention or momentum from Nintendo. They did an outstanding job remaking of a relatively old video game into something new and fresh on a platform that, to be honest, had largely kind of been abandoned. Nobody was really making really awesome Nintendo 3DS games anymore. And so I like to, my correlation here is that, there's lots of opportunities to remake a thing. So if a video game from 20 years ago, someone can come and remake a newer, better version of it on a newer platform with newer technologies and newer ideas. And so WooCommerce is the e-commerce Goliath, but there was Shop, and there still is WP Ecommerce. There were
I haven't heard that in a long time. Shop with 2 P's.
Yeah, right. There were a bunch of early days e-commerce solutions, and so many of which still have tens of thousands of active sites and installs on them. But something like WooCommerce, a team behind it that has a vision, that has a very opinionated way they want to execute some stuff, can really change the world with kind of other, standing on the shoulders of giants and all that. So as far as video games go, it is my pick of the week because it's honestly one of probably my new top 5 video games that everyone who cares about video games should play. It is really that good. And so those are my 2 picks of the week.
There you go. Only on WordPress Weekly are we going to have a video game for a pick, one of the picks of the week. Unbelievable. So there you have it. That's going to do it for this episode of WordPress Weekly. You can find show notes for this episode and all other episodes on wptavern.com. And you can follow me on Twitter at Jeffro, JAFFR0, where 99% of the time I'm tweeting normally, not under the effects of oxycodone. And John, where can we follow you?
Now I'm just going to hold off on tweeting until I get that sweet 280 character extension. There's just no point in even bothering until.
Wow, now you should redo your tweet storm.
Yes. We publicizers should definitely get expanded. I mean, I think the length was pluggable. You could probably filter it. Doesn't matter. So you can find me on GitHub at JJJ. You can read my blog, jjj.blog.
Good boy. You caught yourself. Good boy. All right.
I'm learning.
So there you have it for the show. Catch you on the flip side. We'll talk to you again next Wednesday afternoon. All good things WordPress. So long, everybody.
Bye, y'all.